So welcome everybody for the Scoliosis and Spine online learning. I'm glad that you can join us today. This is an online platform. We encourage learning and learning more about scoliosis and spinal disorders and any other related issues. When you come to the website, you will be able to meet our educators, and we have SSOL short course educators, Leon method educators, and our global presenters. Today, you are part of the monthly free webinar series where educators and scientists, medical doctors, orthotists, physiotherapists, psychotherapists, psychologists, chiropractors, and other professionals and researchers have been presented, and all the presentations from the international experts are in the SSOL library. So can look it up and learn on a continuous basis, because we believe that education has to be continuous after you are explored scoliosis and spinal conditions, and learning never stops. So based on that, we are opened a very large library. Once you go to the video library, you can view over 160 recorded lectures. And today's lecture you're going to see right here once the recording is finished. And you can also browse and look at courses. Some of our courses are available in 6 languages, and you can explore various topics related to scoliosis and spinal conditions, as well as the treatment, surgical, and bracing, physiotherapy, and other type of exercises, part of the PSSC, physiotherapy scoliosis specific exercises. And we explore all age groups, starting for early onset, continuing adolescent, adult scoliosis, senior care, and scoliosis advocacy and awareness. So today we have a very special guest, and Colleen Collins I just met last month, and I was blown away immediately and invited her to come and talk to us about mental health and scoliosis care. So just to introduce quickly, Colleen is a registered psychotherapist based in Ontario, Canada. And she's also the founder of STC Therapy, a virtual mental health practice dedicated to support individuals with scoliosis and chronic pain. Colleen grew up as a competitive figure skater and was diagnosed at age 12. Despite her diagnosis, she continued figure skating and competed on the national levels. Wow, so impressed. She also earned her master's in sports and exercise physiology and master's in counseling psychology. Colleen combines her professional expertise with personal insight to provide compassionate, evidence-based care. Collins works with individuals of all ages and addresses anxiety, depression, body image concerns, chronic pain, and the emotional impact of living with a spinal condition. In addition to supporting families affected by scoliosis, she aims to bridge the gap between the mental health and scoliosis care by counseling with healthcare professionals such as surgeons, chiropractors, physiotherapists, orthotists, and everybody else who is involved in the care of the scoliosis patients. So I want to welcome everybody who's arriving. They're still arriving right now, entering to our webinar. The Q&A board is going to be on the bottom. Please feel free to fill it up with your questions, and perhaps say hello to us where you're from. And on the top corner, you can change the view. It doesn't affect anybody else's. So Today we're going to welcome Colleen Collins and we listened to her lecture and we are happy to welcome you here and looking forward to your presentation and answering with the questions afterwards. So the microphone is yours and please feel free to share the screen.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. I'm honored to be part of like this global movement, and it's amazing how many resources you have available. So thank you for doing all this work, and I'm so excited to be here. Good morning, everybody. It's 10 a.m. I am in Toronto right now, so good morning or afternoon, wherever you might be from. Let me just share my screen. Can see that okay?
Yes, all good. I may
Oh,
disappear, but I'll be in the background. Okay.
of course, no problem. All right. Well, welcome. So today I will be talking about integrating mental health into physical care, primarily scoliosis care and spinal conditions. Um, This webinar is mostly targeted towards healthcare professionals, such as like physiotherapists, shock therapists, but parents or any other professionals, um, and teens, if you're watching, more than welcome here as well. So. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I'll keep it brief. Andrea gave a wonderful introduction, but I grew up as a competitive figure skater. I was diagnosed with scoliosis when I was 11, 12 years old. If you see the X-ray image there, that is actually my spine. That's my most recent X-ray done in 2023. Um, I continued to figure skate about until I was 19 years old, and then actually ended up tearing my ACL. So it wasn't my back that took me out of sports, it was actually my knee. But through there, I was really inspired to learn more about sports psychology. So I pursued my master's of science in sport and exercise psychology. And then after that, I just felt like there was something missing because when I look at athletes, I don't just look at them as athletes, but whole people rather that might experience anxiety or depression just like any other person might. So for me, it became more important to learn more about mental health. And then I took my master's of arts in counseling psychology and became a registered psychotherapist here in Ontario. And shortly after that, I still work with athletes. However, my kind of niche pivoted towards scoliosis. It wasn't until like a conversation with one of my chiropractors. He asked me to do a workshop. He's like, yeah, a lot of the teens here experience anxiety during treatment. I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense. So I agreed. I said, let me look into like the research and really dove into the research and realized there is such a gap here. So really my mission is to help fill that gap and bridge the gap between mental health and scoliosis care. So that's a bit about me. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to look at why mental health matters. We can look at the biopsychosocial model, mental health challenges, symptoms, and what to look out for. Then we're going to go into when to refer, like what are some of those red flags, and then some practical strategies for you, considerations for your clinic, waiting rooms, and your sessions, questionnaires that you could use, like brief screening tools, and some extra resources as well. All right. So, first of all, what is mental health? So, we know that mental health is a state of psychological and social well-being, and that determines like how we handle stress, how we relate to people, and how we make everyday choices. So, our mental health has a pretty big significance in our life, pretty big impact. And we know well enough that, kids and adults are impacted psychologically when it comes to scoliosis. It's not just a physical problem, it's not just the spine, it is the whole person that is being affected by this spine. Um, we also know that mental health will influence treatment outcomes, especially when it comes to bracing, how well they adhere to bracing, and also surgical outcomes as well. Um, Mental health directly affects pain and recovery. We know that the diagnosis can be really frightening and scary and confusing and sometimes even like life altering. Um, Medical trauma and also pediatric medical traumatic stress is a very real thing, and mental and physical health is inseparable. So there was actually a recent study in the Journal of Clinical Orthopedics and Trauma in 2025. And that study concluded that having a multidisciplinary, patient-centered approach with mental health support is essential, especially when it comes to treatment for scoliosis, such as bracing. So we know that multiple research shows that psychological support can improve patient outcomes. So, psychosocial interventions, even brief ones, can be helpful. Literature has shown that cognitive behavioral therapy and peer support enhances brace adherence and outcomes, like I said before. But you don't have to do everything in your clinic. I can imagine if you are like a physiotherapy clinic, you've probably got a lot going on already. So just having like a referral pathway or referral network can be helpful in developing like a mental health protocol for your clinic. And it also demonstrates that holistic approach for the whole person, not just the physical side, but also recognizing that psychological, emotional, and social plays a big role in terms of how they're doing physically as well. Um, but before we talk about referrals, let's get into the challenges and some symptoms. I created this image because I thought it was a good way to kind of put everything into one screen. If I could fit it all into one screen, this is what it would look like. Um, when it comes to scoliosis, what a lot of people see is the asymmetry, the rib prominence, the poor posture. They might see if the teen or adult is wearing a back brace, surgical scars if they've had surgery, and they might see that, they might be doing schroth therapy or especially like if a teen is really involved in physical therapy or schroth therapy, they might be leaving school early for that to make those appointments. So those are some things that we can see, but kind of underneath the iceberg, if you know what an iceberg looks like, there's so much beneath it that we don't see. And that is all the other kind of symptoms that are stirring around, whether it might be discomfort or social anxiety. Oftentimes, teens or adults will kind of isolate themselves. Scoliosis can really disrupt their life in many different ways. Um, might create relationship challenges, body image concerns, kinesphobia, so fear of movement, appearance anxiety, frustration. Sometimes it is really frustrating, not just for the person with scoliosis, but the family as well. It can be really frustrating to sit in that unknown, and be challenged with, what's the best decision that I can make here. Um, Grief and identity loss can also be something they experience, and it's incredibly time consuming to take care of your spine, with all those frequent appointments and x-rays and coordination with families and doctors. It's not just time consuming, it can get really expensive too. Um, so this is I'll look at what we might not see is happening kind of underneath. And feel free if you want to take a picture of the screen, I'm more than happy for you to do that. That is okay. Okay, this is the biopsychosocial model. So the reason why I bring this up is because for a long time, Western healthcare's dominant framework has been the biomedical model, which assumes that physical ailments take biological precedence. It also treats the mind as and body as something that's separate, like separate systems. However, we know that, our brain body connection is inseparable. Example, if you know anything about chronic pain or pain in general, you know that pain is generated in the brain and actually very complex and multifactorial. And we have to look at the different things, such as not just biological, but the psychological and the social, because that also impacts somebody's pain experience and intensity as well. Let's get to my notes here. But we also know that the biopsychosocial model is more of a holistic type of framework. And there is substantial evidence that not just biological, but also psychosocial plays a role in the etiology and the course of many health conditions. So I created I guess, a scoliosis version of the biopsychosocial model. So if we look at biological, there's curve progression, asymmetry, pain, fatigue, sleep. And then psychological, we might see fear progression, a lot of anxiety, self-image, stress, self-esteem, emotional regulation, and some perfectionism in there as well. And then social is school, peers, sports, family, social comparison, which often we do. Um, so basically having that peer or family, whatever support network, that support system network. So, common mental health challenges in teen and adults, we might see anxiety, depression, appearance anxiety. Often, I find the two biggest themes amongst teens and adults with scoliosis are either kind of body image distress, which might include that appearance anxiety, or chronic pain. I find are the two biggest themes that I see, but as a result, we might also experience low self-esteem, some social anxiety and isolation, kinesphobia, so fear of movement, uh, grief, right? There might be a certain type of like identity loss or identity change, and then overall impact of quality of life. However, I think it's important to note that scoliosis doesn't have a direct causal relationship to mental health disorders such as anxiety, OCD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or eating disorders. But if we consider the biopsychosocial model, we might assume, like, as an example, if a teen is bracing that has a really strong support network, like their parents are really supportive, the teachers are on board, their friends are really understanding and supportive when it comes to like their scoliosis and they're wearing a brace, and they like help them out with things, we might see that that teen will have less anxiety as compared to a teen that might not have that social support, feels really like the odd one out, the oddball, um, and tends to isolate themselves. They're more likely to have more anxiety. So that's a example of the social and also environmental contributions in terms of anxiety. We might also, if we were looking at that biopsychosocial model, some people are more predisposed to anxiety based on genetics as well. And then another example is, let's say, the kinesphobia, so the fear of movement. If we're considering the biopsychosocial model, we might look at, if we, I think I can go back here. Yeah. In the psychological beliefs and expectations. So if they believe that they're going to hurt themselves even more by doing physical activity, um, their spine is really fragile. If they have that belief and expectation, then chances are they may develop that fear of movement and experience that kinesphobia as compared to someone else that might not have that belief, might have a very different belief, think their spine is very strong and adaptable, and continue to do the activities that they do. So there's a big kind of underlying and multifactorial, uh, I don't want to say explanation, but considerations when it comes to these challenges that they might be experiencing. I'm just going to repeat this because I feel like it's really important. Um, we know, especially when it comes to bracing, that even though there's a lot of research now which shows the effectiveness of bracing. However, we also know that it impacts psychosocial well-being, which will often lower adherence and also really impacts quality of life. But having early psychological identification, so being able to identify when a client or a patient is in stress because of treatment, or having a spinal condition, if we can identify that early on and have interventions like cognitive behavioral therapy or even peer support groups, this can enhance compliance or adherence, and improve outcomes, which is ideally what we want, right? Um, so brief screening and holistic care can definitely lessen the adverse effects of bracing treatment. With that being said, when it comes to, like I said, this webinar is more geared towards physiotherapists or other healthcare professionals. So I actually had pulled this. So psychological health often influences and impacts the recovery of physical injury, or, with any consideration or condition, sorry. Uh, so it's reasonable that a physiotherapist might ask additional questions about psychological health. And I pulled this from a case study through the College of Physiotherapists of Ontario. And there was a formal complaint done by a patient because that patient felt like the physiotherapist had asked too many questions about her depression and too many questions about her mental health. So she actually filed a complaint. And the physiotherapist was very good with their note taking and taking notes throughout the session, documenting everything, and they had come to the conclusion that because our mind and body are inseparable and our mental health can impact healing, then it wouldn't be unreasonable for her to ask, or the physiotherapist, sorry, to ask more questions about mental health related concerns, especially if you feel there is a referral kind of needed. I have a real life example of this. I was speaking to a chiropractor, and he had told me the story about this one lady. He hadn't seen her for a long time and then came back to the clinic, and she had a very tight, like very tight neck, and upper shoulders. Her shoulders were very tense, and she was experiencing a lot of pain. And the chiropractor had asked, like, what's going on in life? And she had said, oh, nothing, nothing. And then 15 minutes in to that session, she had disclosed that she was going through a divorce. And he's like, well, I am going to be honest with you. I don't want to waste your money for you to keep coming back because this is only a temporary, this is short form relief for you right now. You should go see a therapist. And she actually took offense to that and got pretty upset with him, maybe the way in which he had approached that conversation. But she did go see a psychotherapist and then had actually come back to the chiropractor and told him, I understand now. I am feeling better. Will you still see me as your patient? And he said, yes, no problem. So really, really nice outcome of just having that holistic care approach and recognizing that, you know, I don't want to keep wasting your money and you keep coming back and back and back when this is not the problem. It's this thing, what you're significantly going through in life. That is what needs to be dealt with right now. So, like I said, really demonstrating that holistic care approach and actually improve the rapport between the patient and the chiropractor. And as a result of that, she trusted them more and referred more people to that person because of that rapport and trust that was built through that, kind of difficult conversation there. So these are some things to watch out for, and then I will get into when to refer. Some things that you do want to watch out for is excessive worry. If you notice the patient is, overthinking a lot, or they have some of those like physical symptoms of anxiety, and some of that might include like even before like your appointment, or sometimes if you have a child, and as an example, if you have a child and they've avoided school before because there was a test that they weren't really prepared for that day, and all of a sudden they have a really bad stomach ache. Well, that is kind of a sign of anxiety, and physical symptoms might include stomach aches, headaches, nausea, the racing heart. We also want to watch out for persistent sadness or irritability. Everyone's allowed to kind of have those, like off days or bad days, but if it's persistent, then this is something that we want to keep an eye out. Withdrawal from family or friends, isolating yourself, loss of interest in activities. So if they're just not excited to do anything anymore, they can't find the fun in anything, nothing really interests them. This is something to watch out for as well. Oftentimes a symptom of depression. Um, Excessive time worrying about asymmetry or body shape. Now, there is a line here. It's hard to find that line because I think a lot of people do have those concerns throughout their life, regardless, when it comes to body image specifically, regardless if they do have a spinal condition or not. However, with a spinal condition, we will see that it's amplified. But if they are excessively worrying about it, then this is something to just think about. Whether you're a patient or a healthcare professional, this is where we might warrant that referral for sure. Signs of sensory overload or discomfort, and then pain that gets worse with stress, anxiety, or emotional triggers. And again, if you feel it would be helpful to take a picture of the screen, you're more than welcome to do that. So when to refer? I've had this question before, like when do I know when to refer? And I find it's very context based, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. Um, But essentially, these would be the basic guidelines, I would say, is if you find that issue is outside of your competency level or experience level, or if that issue interferes with their daily functioning, if the issue is a barrier to making progress in treatment, similar to that example with the case study, where the formal complaint was done because she felt like their physiotherapist was asking too many questions about her depression and kind of mental health. Uh, it's clearly a barrier to making progress. So if you do find that there is a barrier there, then that might be the time to have that conversation. And then issues in psychological or issues that are psychological in nature and deals with deep-seated emotions would be something that you might want to refer. Red flags. Now, depending which college or governing body that you're with, this might be a little bit different. I would always check your standards of practice, especially when it comes to like a duty to report as well. I know for me as a registered psychotherapist, if I believe that someone is going to put themselves in harm, imminent danger, or somebody else in harm, then yes, I do have a duty to report. Um, there is a difference between duty to report and when to refer. So I'd be very mindful of that. Um, for the first one here, client discloses thinking of doing self-harm or harming others. That's a major like red alarm here that I may have to report depending on context and the situation, but most likely we'll have to report. However, other kind of red flags, things to watch out for, a client shows up intoxicated or mentions that they take part in substance abuse. Definitely going to have to make a referral for that. A client discloses current abuse. A client reveals and becomes fixated on past trauma. A client mentions that they believe they are struggling with a mental health concern that is significantly disrupting their life. So these are really the basics for referral, and then you use your own sense of judgment here as well. Um, but let's get into some examples. Let's play red flag or green flag. But before we go further with that, I just want to clarify what I mean by referral. And referral could be referring to either a psychotherapist, a psychologist, or psychiatrist. Now, depending in which area you are from, that might look different. Like here in Ontario, we have social workers, psychotherapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists are, I would say, the main group of mental health professionals. Here in Ontario, psychiatrists, basically the difference is psychiatrists can diagnose and prescribe medication. Psychologists cannot prescribe medication, but can diagnose and assess. Or psychotherapists do mainly psychotherapy. They cannot diagnose and they cannot prescribe medication either. That's the difference between the three here in Ontario specifically. Like I said, your region might be very, very different, but what I mean by referral is referring to a healthcare professional or mental health, sorry, mental health professional. Um, so let's play red flag or green flag. I have a little bit of context here, and you're going to guess whether you think that is a red flag, which would be I might want to refer to a mental health care professional here, or a green flag, this is something that does not, condone a referral. Okay. A client has an appointment with you after their work shift and discloses how stressful their day was. Now, do you think this is a red flag or a green flag? Do we refer or do we let it go? Now, I can't see any Q&A, but that's okay. I'm going to tell you the answer. Anyway, I would say this is more of a green flag. I respect you as a physiotherapist, Schroth therapist, because oftentimes you're like mental health therapist to an extent at times where you're listening to all these people's problems throughout the day, like how their work day was. Even hairdressers, I find, have a lot of respect for you as well because you sit there and you listen, which is such a big part of your job without knowing it at times, I think. So oftentimes, I know for when I tore my ACL, I was a manager at the gym at the time when I was gonna get my ACL surgery. And my physiotherapist knew all the drama that was happening at the gym. Um, so definitely have a lot of respect there. But does this warrant a referral? Not necessarily. A teenage client wearing a brace often shows up in baggy clothes, hiding their body, and expresses that they sit in the bathroom during lunch break to avoid people making fun of her. Red flag or green flag? I'm gonna say red flag. This is significantly disrupting their life. They are clearly isolating themselves here, and this referral might be to a therapist or a peer support group, whatever might be beneficial, what they think might be beneficial, but that conversation does need to be brought up with that teenager and also the parents as well. We might take a family approach here. A client discloses that they are self-conscious of their scoliosis and feels they can't start dating because of it. Red flag or green flag? I'm going to say red flag because once again, this is disrupting their life. It's disrupting their social life, especially. Um, I have a different example. It actually happened last week. I was seeing an athlete and they have injured their hip. So they can't do all the things that they want to do, like canoeing. They can't train for their triathlon. They can't go biking. Like so many things that they've kind of put on the side for a little bit. And she had told me that she was dating, but then she injured her hip and now she's put dating on pause and her whole life on pause, she feels like. And I had said to her, okay, well, this person, if you were dating, are they dating the triathlon or are they dating you? Right. So that was, I think, a really good example because what had actually happened for her was she was doing all these like boring physiotherapy exercises, and that turned into I can't do the activities I love. I'm just doing this boring stuff. Therefore, I'm boring, and nobody would want to date me being boring, right? So that's what we had kind of dug out in session, which this injury had significantly interfered with her beliefs and expectations about herself and just disrupting her social life. But luckily she is in therapy. Okay. So here are some practical strategies for you as a healthcare professional. So we'll talk about the clinic first. Um, when a patient walks into the clinic, it's always nice to have a receptionist, if you do have a receptionist, that greets them warmly, politely, with a smile, because energy travels. Energy, whatever energy it might be, we have this thing called emotional contagion. And basically, what that means is that emotions are contagious, right? People tend to take on or mirror other people's moods, energy levels, emotions, whatever it might be. So it's very important that the receptionist is, that warm, welcoming person, and that's gonna significantly help reduce the patient or the client's anxiety when they walk into that clinic because we don't want an overworked, exhausted, haven't had my coffee person in the morning. Not great. Um, Having comfortable seating and kind of in arranging the chairs in small groups rather than like squished together, that can really help with a person's comfort level. And having calming, kind of attractive, and cheerful artwork can be really helpful. I remember when I went to Sick Kids Hospital, it is a very child-centric hospital. And when I was going through the x-rays, I remember walking through the hallways and there was the fun little picture of it was like an x-ray, but they had like these frogs hanging over it so you could see their like upper body and then their like thoracic and lumbar spine. You could see like through the x-ray screen and then their little frog legs are hanging out. And I still remember that picture, that painting on the wall. That probably made me feel better as like an 11, 12-year-old walking through this big giant hospital. I would highly suggest especially if you are working with children or teens, always nice for adults too, but to have more of a calming kind of artwork or posters. If we have all these different flyers in our clinic, it's gonna feel like your clinic is like a pharmaceutical advertisement. And that can be really overwhelming and somewhat unauthentic as well. Um, I would also suggest having productive distractions if you have a waiting room. And this might be educational videos, like based on your clinic itself, a fish tank, or even like a soothing background kind of music. Because if you have TVs and the news is on, or having too many flyers, that can feel really chaotic and overwhelming. So if you do have the news, I might suggest finding some educational videos to play on that TV rather than watching something that's incredibly overwhelming. Like I said, talking about the hospital, this imagine if you were a child. Let's say, you're 8 years old, you're walking to where you would do the x-rays. It's a long walk down that dark hallway, pretty scary. And then you see this room, and that's really overwhelming. Like all these wires and things like as an 8-year-old, you're not gonna understand or know what any of that is for. Even for an adult, if you don't work in this type of profession, like that's really scary. That's overwhelming. There's a lot going on there. But this is from Sick Kids Hospital. And like I said, Sick Kids in Toronto is a child-centric hospital. So they do have a lot of color, a lot of pattern, a lot of fun little images going on. Um, Maybe perhaps for your clinic, you have a little section like this where you do have some, distracting toys. Um, or you do, like I said, having kind of n nice calming posters, or depending on, who you work with primarily. But I would walk into I would take an audit of your clinic and I would walk into it, but with a different perspective and pretend that you're either an adult that has no idea about, has never been to physio before, or you're a scoliosis patient and you've never done Schroth before, how would you feel walking into that clinic? And maybe even get a friend or a family member to walk into the clinic and ask them their thoughts, just to say their thoughts out loud. And this can be a really good indicator into what people feel when they walk into your clinic, what that first experience or first impression is. Now, in session, we want to make sure that, active listening is, I think active listening is such a skill. Um, and just making sure that client feels heard. Because if they do feel heard and understood, they are more likely to consider your medical recommendations. It's always nice to preview the appointment so people know what they're walking into. Oftentimes in consultations for psychotherapy, I do have, especially if they've never done therapy before, clients will ask me, what does a first session look like? So I'll kind of share with them what that might look like to ease their anxiety about it so they know what to expect. People don't really like surprises. So this can be really helpful when, let's say you're finishing one session, you can say, okay, for the next session, this is what we might work on. Or even during like a phone call with the receptionist, that receptionist might tell that scoliosis patient, this is what the sessions will look like when you first walk in. I will walk you through everything. So that grounds them a little bit. They know what to expect. They know what they're walking into, really. Um, and being able to empathize with the client, because a lot of them have fear and just kind of normalizing the experience. Like, I know this is kind of scary, and I say that to adults coming to therapy. I know this is scary sometimes, or it might feel a little bit awkward, and that is totally okay. So just kind of validating that experience and validating any worries that they might be experiencing. And validating is not the reassurance, it's not the, oh, you're going to be fine. It's going to be just fine. Because that can actually be really invalidating in itself, actually. But what we want to do, what that validation is understanding like this is, or having the appreciation that this is hard. I understand this is hard. Or, this looks like it's a little much for you. I'm going to be here with you, right? That can be just validation. Looks like this is incredibly overwhelming, or you look a little bit anxious. That's okay, right? Letting that emotion be there rather than kind of dismissing it and saying everything's going to be okay. It's going to be just fine. Okay. It also might be helpful to kind of have a notepad available. I find a lot of now observing physios and observing surgical clinics. I've noticed that oftentimes they do have questions, or there's a lot of terminology that they don't really understand, and they're gonna go home and Google it after. So it might be helpful just to have a notepad or like a sticky note where they can write things down and they can take that home with them because they also, if this is a family with a child with scoliosis, that parent might go to their spouse and be able to better explain what the either the surgeon or physiotherapist, trial therapist, what they had explained to them. So they'll have a easier time kind of talking to their spouse or their partner about that. Um, Asking if we would like the door open or closed. I don't think a lot of healthcare professionals think about this because it's either very natural or it's just a simple thing. But this can really make a difference in terms of the comfort level of a patient. And always asking for consent before touching and explaining the purpose. I'm going to, is it okay if I touch your back because I'm looking for this certain thing? Right? That can be helpful. Again, patients don't like surprises, so explaining step by step kind of why you're doing things. And then engaging them in simple tasks that they can control, that it would be okay for them to do themselves. Whether if you're doing an ultrasound, maybe they can put the gel on themselves, or the reflex tool, I called it when I was little, the little hammer. And I would just like jab my knee with it, and I thought it was the funnest thing, which definitely reduced my anxiety as a child. Was just that playing with that little tool, so simple. So asking if they want to be part of any of the process and really engaging them in the process will help them feel like they have control. I have a little story for you. I'll try to make it short. I went to an allergist the other month. I'm allergic to grass, trees, ragweed, mold, like everything, cats, everything. But I didn't know what to expect walking into this appointment. It wasn't explained very well, and I did have to kind of Google to, see what to expect. Um, and the allergist, very nice old gentleman, probably been doing this for years. He knows what he's doing, and I trust that. But being in that small little room with him, it was very, very narrow, it was very tiny. I had my arm laid out on like the table because they kind of prick you. First of all, I didn't even know that they like prick you. So I'm like, what are all these little like knife pointy things that you are taking out of these packages? Like, what is that for? None of those steps were explained to me like in the moment because it was very, like I said, he's probably done this for years, very natural. Like, this is something he does every single day, but this is not something that I do every single day. So I'm like, well, what is going on here? I don't understand. And then they drop oil. And you know what? It would have been really nice to know, like, which oil, because that's the allergen, like, which oil was going onto my skin. So I'd be like, oh, I'm really allergic to cats. That's cool, right? Kind of having some knowledge where I had literally no clue. And like I said, the small room, the door closed, that was actually really uncomfortable for me. So something simple that he could have done would ask, do you want the door open or would you prefer that's closed? Because if it was open, like it really wouldn't have mattered to me. Um, but some patients will feel more comfortable with the door closed, protecting their confidentiality. I get it, right? Um, so that was my brief little story about that. Here are some questionnaires or screening tools that you can have, and you can set this up into like a QR code so the patient scans it and they just fill it out like online. If you do like even a Google form, you can turn it into a Google form, or on paper, whichever you use in your clinic. But the BSSQ brace, so Bad Soberheim Stress Questionnaire, that is an 8-question survey aimed at assessing the stress in scoliosis patients that are wearing braces. So that's a very brace specific one. Um, the generalized anxiety, the GAD, this doesn't really have, I don't want to say it has nothing to do with scoliosis, but this survey wasn't made for scoliosis, so it's not scoliosis specific, but it does assess anxiety. And same with the PHQ-9. This one screens for depression, not scoliosis specific, but depression specific. We also have the patient reported outcomes measurement information system. This is more of a person-centered measure, that monitors physical, mental, and social health in adults and children. the Italian Spine Youth Quality of Life. So this is scoliosis specific, and it is for youth specifically. And this is a 20 item measure for spine related quality of life. Now, some of these surveys, you'll notice that they assess quality of life, and then ups, uh, some of them assess mental health disorders such as anxiety or depression. Then we have the SRS-22R, which is the Scoliosis Research Society 22R, the revised version, and this is 22 items, and the Pediatric Quality of Life Questionnaire. Now, this one is not scoliosis specific, but more so quality of life for pediatrics. Again, if you want to take a picture of this screen, you're more than welcome to. If you find this would be helpful to include in your clinic as just a brief screening intervention. So if you do notice that, a client is kind of showing that red flag, this might be that extra assurance of, hey, is it okay if we go through this survey and then we can make a referral from there? Okay. Now, I don't want to leave this out because I think this is very important within your strategies and tools as a healthcare professional. But self-care is an ethical imperative. And that was something that was told to me in university as a psychotherapist. I need to take care of myself so that I can better take care of others. And that was sunk into my head, and I still don't forget it. So, prioritizing yourself is not selfish, it's actually selfless because you're better able to effectively care for others. And this might be taking breaks, setting boundaries, movement, prioritizing sleep, nutrition, making sure we're eating well, makes us feel a little better, and hobbies. Having hobbies, I think, is so important and can help you prevent burnout as well. I see this a lot in athletes, especially when they don't have any hobbies. Um, they often put everything towards their sport. They're more likely to burn out and burn out quicker, as opposed to an athlete that does have hobbies and other life interests. If and when they retire or leave their sport, they tend to do much better as opposed to athletes that don't have that kind of balance in their life. So I think hobbies are essential for your self-care. You're allowed to do other things than work in your life. Here are some extra resources that I've come across, which I think are so incredibly helpful. Higgy Bears is the cutest thing. They make scoliosis treatment more bearable. So they have little teddy bears that have back braces or kind of stitching in the back for surgical. Um, and nonprofit organization based in the States. Very cute. We also have Curvy Girls and Scolios Us, which if you check out Scolios Us, they have a lot of resources on their website. It was actually created by Megan, who is an orthotist. So I certainly recommend checking her out because she has a couple courses for orthotists or clinicians as well, and is really trying to integrate mental health into scoliosis care. Um, so love Scolios Us. The Bionic Project is very recent, but this is primarily for adults with fusion. She's trying to create a peer support community and just had her first really in person big event 2 months ago, and it looked really good. So if you are primarily working with adults with scoliosis or fusion, I think that is a good resource there. And then Tangled in the Curves, her mission in that book was to include the whole journey of scoliosis from diagnosis, ongoing treatment to adulthood, and include everything you could know or would want to know about scoliosis into one resource. So that was her goal with that book. And then we have STC Therapy, where my mission is to really bridge the gap between mental health and scoliosis. So I do provide psychotherapy, and I also have some support groups running as well. I have a parent support group starting in July, so definitely recommend checking that out because the first one went so well and was so incredible to witness these parents really supporting each other and just feeling that validation, feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. I am making the best decision. Um, so that was really beautiful to witness. So I am starting that group up again in July if you're interested, because parents need support too. They're going through this as well. So I just wanted to thank you. I'm really excited to be here. And if you do have any questions, you can post in the Q&A below. And feel free to email me or even follow me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on there as well. That is okay. And then the QR code is just a feedback survey, things you might like about this lecture or things that, you thought maybe improve. I really value feedback and improving so I can make this better for everybody. So please go ahead if you're live here now, you can fill out, or watching, you can fill out that survey for me as well. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colleen. We really enjoyed this very intense talk and all the details. And since we have a smaller group, you could put your questions in the Q&A, or if you would like to ask your questions live, you can put your hand up and I will be able to add your voice to live session. And I would like to just add for resources, since many of you look like are from Canada here, Scoliosis Resource Center and the upcoming events, just to have a little bit more um, awareness across the country. So Scoliosis Resource Center has been around since 2008, and it's not just a place to go for information, but also you can watch the history of scoliosis awareness in Ottawa particular. We have proclaimed Scoliosis Awareness Day June 1st, which is going to be tomorrow, with the mayor of Ottawa. And you can do that also in your city, in your community. And how to do that, you will be finding information in the resource center. We also have a Scoliosis Awareness Walk. It will be the 11th year for this event, and it is something you can also organize in your community to raise awareness of scoliosis, mental health, and all the different aspects of this condition. And it's important to invite your whole team. So this has been a long history of this. And if you wanted to organize any of these events, the detailed step-by-step project plan is there, and we're happy to share it with you to make sure that your community will have also more connections, patients connections, families connections. And of course, we have online resources, which more or less you mentioned already. And so please feel free to explore the Scoliosis Resource Center .com and connect with your community, connect your patients, and connect the families, because they can definitely help each other. If you do have a clinic where you are seeing scoliosis patients, Just like Colleen, we can help you to set up support groups. We have run support groups since 2008. Since COVID, we have more of the connections done by one, not a physical group every second Friday, but that was really informative and important for us. And this is why I feel mental health is so important, because we did not have one meeting when we didn't have a problem with mental health. And in these support groups, we found kids with eating disorders, depression, suicidal thoughts, and lucky enough, we always had a parent who is either psychologist or psychiatrist in the group. So I would really encourage you to have these families connect with a professional directly or indirectly, because I didn't feel equipped to handle all these issues which come up accidentally in a meeting like that. And if you feel questions coming later on, you can email us ssolglobal@gmail.com, or you can directly email Colleen for the question. The recording will be available at the library in a few days, and you will be able to rewatch. And I really enjoyed every slide you presented. I loved the iceberg. It is really, really important to know that we are just looking at the tip of it. And as your lecture is on the last day of Mental Health Awareness Month, and as June 1st Scoliosis Awareness Month begins, I think it was the perfect timing to perhaps connect the two very important topics.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you everyone for listening.
So hope you will encourage your community of learning more about scoliosis and, of course, mental health, because they go together. Thanks, Colleen. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.